that fire has begun. Let's listen in as we hear from officials on the latest on the investigation and indeed the victims of the fire. This, of course, is a press conference that is being held to update people. As we know, so far, 40 are known to have died and over 100 have been injured in that fire, in that club, in the Swiss resort of Crans-Montana. I think we can try and listen in now.
Gestern Donnerstag am 1. Januar 2026 in Crans-Montana zugetragen hat.
Thank you very much for being here again. I am speaking today on behalf of the cantonal authorities and for the entire emergency services. Today, speakers today, I will introduce them to you. The President of the State Council, the Head of the Department for Health and Social Affairs and Culture, Mr. Renard Mathias, the Head of the Department for Institutional Security, Safety and Sport, the Head of the Department, Mr. Stefan Ganser, the Attorney General, Béatrice Piou, the Commander of the Cantonal Police, Mr. Frédéric Gisler. Along the table is the head of the Cantonal Judicial Police, Lieutenant Colonel Pierre-Antoine Lingen, the Director of the Cantonal Emergency Services, Dr. Freddy Michel Roten, and the Director General of the Hospital du Valais, the Professor Eric Bouma. Madam Attorney General, I hand the floor to you. Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel. I will now open this third press conference on the dramatic events in Crans-Montana. I would like to thank you for your presence in such good numbers for this third press conference, which will take place in the following manner. The President of the State Council, Mr. Mathias Renard, will speak on behalf of the State Council. The Cantonal Police Commander, Frédéric Gisler, will then speak about the situation from a factual point of view. I will then come back to speak about where we are in terms of the investigation. I will then hand over to Lieutenant Colonel Lingen, who will speak about the identification of the victims. I will then hand over to the Head of the Department, Stefan Ganser. The State Councillor, Mathias Renard, will then speak to us from a health perspective. There will then be Dr. Freddy Michel Roten, who will speak to us about the significant commitment from our services. And then finally, Professor Eric Auvin will speak about the current situation at the Valais Hospital. I will then take the floor again to close. At the end of this press conference, as with the two previous conferences, we will answer your questions, and we have then got all of the speakers will then be available to give individual interviews. Thank you, Mr. President. Over to you. Thank you, Madam Attorney General. Ladies and gentlemen, representatives of the media, I am speaking as President of and as Health Minister. Following the day after this drama, the Valais government once again is addressing its thoughts to the families of the victims, the families of the injured, the families and the loved ones who are waiting. We are aware of the time, which is particularly difficult, unbearable, each minute that passes without answers. Our teams, since the first minutes, have been doing their maximum to save lives, to support the families and to leave nobody alone, and clearly to identify as quickly as possible the victims. What we can say today is the cooperation which has been put in place, this cooperation in the provision of care to the injured. First of all, the Valais Hospital immediately cared for at least half of the 129 patients admitted. The other cantons then provided support, immense support. Thank you to them. The hospital will come back on the details, but we know, for example, that the CHUV, the Lausanne Hospital, cared for more than 20 patients. We would like to express our thanks for this collaboration. This solidarity, this collaboration did not stop at the national borders. Many offers for help came from abroad, in particular from neighbouring countries. Our role as state councillors is also to facilitate these international contacts. We would like to thank once again the Confederation, the President of the Confederation, and all of the federal councillors who are supporting us faced with this drama. Mr. Parmelin gave the order to not just put the flags at half-mast across the Confederation's buildings, but across all Swiss embassies around the world. We are faced with a drama for Valais, for Switzerland, and for the European community. Internationally, we have been able to speak with the French Ministry of Health, Madame Rist, who has personally assured me of the support of her country to provide care to the injured. Transfers have already started towards hospitals in France. She also made available to us specialized med doctors to support the organization of these transfers and to support us directly in the Valais Hospital. This offer was accepted. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs from Italy, Mr. Talini, also came today to Crans-Montana. We went with my colleague Gonza to spend a solemn moment, but also to meet the families of the Italian community affected by this drama. Once again, an offer to provide care for people injured was made and accepted, with transfers of the injured to the north of Italy. Solidarity is working faced with this drama which has affected Valais, and it is essential. And once again, the hospital will give more details later through Mr. Frédéric Michel Roten. What we can say is that around 50 injured have been transferred or will be transferred soon to European countries in specialized centers for severe burns. Humanity today has taken the relay. This is in addition to the professionalism of our teams and demonstrating unprecedented solidarity in the care for victims. We are faced with a drama and a dramatic human. We can see 40 people have died. These figures are stunning, and in the name of the government, I would like to express my sympathy and our most sincere condolences to this, faced with this challenge. We would like to remind you that many people were injured and are still fighting to live. Many people receiving care are in a critical condition. They have been cared for by exceptional teams in Sion, in other hospitals in the country, and in hospitals in neighbouring countries. Following this press conference, I will go to the hospital to support patients and to talk with the teams on site. And I'd like to salute the exceptional work by the hospital, the Valais Hospital, and we can be proud of that hospital. Their management and all of the teams, the medical care teams, have been providing exceptional work, which is continuing today. The work is immense. The workers at the hospital are doing a remarkable job. Many people have given up their leave to go to the hospital to come and treat, to support the teams on site. A nurse told me today that silence is reigning during these moments at the hospital. Finally, to communicate, I would like to say that the ceremony will be held in Crans-Montana on Friday, the 9th of January 2026. We have just informed the Federal Council This ceremony will be the opportunity to come together, to meet as a community, to come to live this national mourning together. Book of Condolences will also be put online from tomorrow, Saturday, on the website for the Confederation in order to allow everybody who wishes to do so to share a message of support, solidarity to the people affected. Thank you for your attention. Ladies and gentlemen, yesterday morning, destiny for around 160 people changed to horror during a night of celebration in Grand Resort. Since then, the Cantonal Police and its partners have been working unceasingly to provide legitimate answers to all of these victims and their families affected by this unprecedented drama. The first of them, the most significant, is to understand if their loved ones are among the injured or among those people who have lost their lives during this tragic fire. Here is what I can communicate to you at this time, while stating that this information has been shared previously with the families concerned. First of all, those people who were injured, 113 of them have been formally and definitively identified. For 6 others, the formal identification process is still taking place. Among the injured, formally identified, 71 are Swiss. We also identified 14 French citizens, 11 Italians, 4 Serbs, 1 Bosnian, a Belgian, a Luxembourg citizen, a Polish citizen, and a Portuguese citizen. 14 of them, the nationality currently is unknown, and I would like to emphasize that all of these figures may change according to the advances in formal identification. In terms of those who have died, as the President of our government said, we regret at this stage that there are 40 victims, 40. Their formal identification is continuing unceasingly. That is our priority, identifying as quickly as possible these dead people. We have the resources necessary to do that. You can count on the support of many specialists from several Swiss Cantonal police forces, who I would like to thank, but identification protocols, formal standardized processes internationally take time. So we have been working with several countries, including Belgium, Switzerland, Italy, Portugal, but also Philippines, Congo, Romania, Serbia, and Turkey. These processes are essential to enable us to provide a formal and definitive identification as quickly as possible. Cantonal Police from Valais would like, through me today, to reaffirm its support to the families so terribly affected by these events. In addition to our mission to identify and investigate, I have ordered each of these families to be able to receive personalized support day and night until the body of their loved one can be formally identified. We would like to support them as well as possible during this period, above all this period of uncertainty and suffering. Finally, I would like to express my most sincere thanks to all of the police forces and the partners who have been committed to this operation. Thanks to their mobilization, we have been able to act quickly to provide care to the victims and start to work to identify. This work will continue, as you have understood, in the coming days with a full commitment. In terms of the first results of the investigation by the Ministry of the Content-Valais, I would like to now hand over to Béatrice Pillot, the Attorney General of the Valais Canton. Thank you very much for your attention.
Merci, Commandant.
Thank you, Commander. In terms of the investigation itself, I would like to reassure you that the public minister is putting absolutely everything in place to identify the circumstances of this dramatic event. As a reminder, an investigation was opened today for now to identify the circumstances of this fire. Absolutely every avenue is being explored. There is none that is left to one side. No avenues are being neglected. In the hypotheses, some are being confirmed today. Indeed, everything leads us to think that the fire started from sparkling candles or sparklers which were put on bottles of champagne, and that was moved too close to the ceiling. From that, a blaze began quickly, very quickly, and a general blaze. To achieve this first result, there are videos which have been obtained, which have been analyzed. There are several people who have been interviewed, and reports have been made on site. In the interviews which were carried out, there are in particular the two French managers and those who escaped. These interviews enabled us to establish, on the one hand, lists of people who were present during this evening. These lists enable us to help to identify. These interviews also enabled us to explain the internal configuration of the premises, the work carried out, and the capacity. The next steps of the investigation will focus in particular on the work carried out within the bar, the materials utilized, the operating permits, the safety measures, by which I mean extinguishers, emergency exits, fire standards, and the resources to fight fires, the number of people who were present on that evening, the number of people that the bar is authorized to receive, the materials in the site, and the emergency exits, and access. In addition to all of that, the Zurich Forensische Institute has been authorized according to the results which will be found and based on the measures taken during the investigation. The investigation, there will be the possibility or not to consider whether there is a penal liability which could affect people. If that is the case, and if those people are still alive, there will be a case opened against them for causing a fire through negligence, homicide through negligence, and corporal damage by negligence. In terms of the identification, there are many people working on that. We are speaking about more than 30 people working to enable the families to be in the clear, to understand whether the members of their family have died or been victims or not. There is a method which is clear, which will be explained to you by Lieutenant Colonel Lengen. Before concluding, I would like truly to thank for all of the support that has been received, whether it be from the forces of order, but also from the public ministries. Particular thanks to all of my colleagues, attorneys who have been working on this, and everybody who has said that they are ready to come and help us. You have understood the priority today is truly to focus on the identification of people, to enable families to start to mourn. Thank you very much for your attention. I will now hand over to Lieutenant Colonel Lingen. Thank you, Madam Attorney General. I will repeat here once again, even if it has been said several times, how important it is for the Cantonal Police to identify all of the people who have died. That is an absolute priority for the moment. We can do this work by leveraging almost every Cantonal police body with the Confederation, the Federal Police, with different Swiss partners and international partners. In this particular context, we can call upon a structure called the DVI, which is a Swiss structure, which is essentially engaged to identify the victims of disasters. It is made up of police officers, forensic police officers, also doctors and dentists. This structure particularly was called upon in 2004 when the tsunami also had Swiss victims. It works using international standards, particularly Interpol recommendations, in as much as in this domain, identifying victims. No mistakes can be permitted. We need to give the correct remains back to the families. So the police from Valois has called upon this structure, has been working since yesterday, as Madam Attorney General said, with 30 people. First of all, they visited the premises. They removed the remains to then take them to using established protocols, and as I speak to you, they are continuing to examine the bodies in order to be able to complete the post-mortem file. This is the file which contains all of the elements for identification which we find on the remains. Their fingerprints, their DNA, maybe objects that they are still wearing or were wearing at the moment they died. And then this data is then compared with pre-death data collected from the first day from the families of the loved ones. This information is on what they are wearing, objects that they may be carrying, but also DNA, which has been taken and can be used to then make comparisons. Once these two elements, pre and post-mortem, have been obtained, a file is prepared. It is subjected to an identification commission. This commission is made up of the public minister, the doctors, and a police officer, and this commission will validate what we call a reconciliation process, will then validate the correlation between pre- and post-mortem. Once this correlation has been established, the file is validated by this commission, which will then submit it to the public ministry, who will then release the body, and the death certificate be completed by the coroner. And then they can go on to the family and then carry out the next steps in the operation. We have the support today from the civil state registers, who are also helping us to enable the families concerned do not need to carry out the entire procedure alone. They will be supported by judicial police inspectors to carry out the formalities with the civil registration services. And I would like to thank them for the work they have been doing. Thank you. This is what we have been doing too. This is an absolute priority, but as you have understood, it is complex and must be very meticulous. You cannot, and I repeat that, we cannot make mistakes in this area. And even if the waiting is very difficult to experience, we know that all of our employees are working day and night, and have been doing so since the start of the event, to, as quickly as possible, provide the answers to the families. Thank you very much. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. In terms of security, the Canton Valley can rely on intercantonal solidarity and international solidarity. We are in an emergency phase where we had to intervene, secure the site, save people, and now we have moved to the consolidation phase with the work on safety, security, as my colleagues have said, does not stop today. The work is essentially done by the police with three priorities, absolute priorities: support for families in Switzerland and abroad. The families have now been to Crans-Montana, supported by the police. The police are protecting them, they are supporting them, and that is very important for us today. And when we announce to the families the identifications, clearly those families will be able to count on police support, police accompaniment, which will not stop at that moment and will enable those families not to be alone, to have psychological support from the police to support them. The second priority is the identification of the victims. I'm not going to repeat what has already been said. This is a priority, and the resources will demonstrate that the canton is receiving significant support to enable us to put an end to this unbearable weight experienced by many families now. So thirdly, the establishment of the facts, as the Attorney General has said, the videos that you can see in the media, but also show the reality. This reality is now faced with investigation requirements, legal requirements, and interviews will enable us to establish the reality of the facts, which is a priority. So these three priorities clearly are exceptional resources which have been engaged to meet the requirements of this event, which is unprecedented in the history of our canton. We are receiving support from the Federal Police Office currently. 4 federal police officers are in Valais. They have been providing support from the forensic institutes, which are present also in the work to carry out an analysis to establish the facts and to analyze the start of this fire. We have these people from this institute, 6 people who are here in Valais. Around 40 police officers from the Cantonal Police in uniform are still present, and some of them are in this room too, and they are present in the field to support, to guide, to secure the site. And also we have police inspectors, around 40 inspectors carrying out the investigation, the interviews, and in addition to that there are 30 or so specialists, victim identification, doctors, police officers, dentists as well. So there are dozens of people showing that this clearly is something important for us, and we are putting the resources in place with federal and international support. In terms of institutional, the Valais Canton is collaborating closely with the Federal Department of Foreign Affairs with everything relating to the diplomatic and international aspects. Today, the hospital transfers are a priority which will enable the people injured to be cured as well as possible. So there is significant traffic there because there are flights being organised to neighbouring countries, essentially, and other countries which are continuing to offer their help. This requires many procedures which we can utilise across the Confederation through the DFAIA. We've also seen the Italian Minister of Foreign Affairs earlier, which demonstrates the importance of this event. We have been able to demonstrate everything put in place to him, and there will be surely other visits from other states in the coming days, which demonstrate this cooperation, which demonstrates the human contact to develop this cooperation as well as possible. There you are. That is what I had to tell you in terms of security. A final point is the care of the carers and the support to those carers and the forces of order. We will not abandon this, quite the contrary. People who have been operating, the first responders yesterday, the people living in the near to the site have access to professional health personnel, and those people who are working in the different hospitals of Switzerland and Europe to whom we extend our entire thanks. I have ended. Ladies and gentlemen, the representatives of the media, the event that we experienced yesterday in the last hours is a tragedy for all of the victims and their loved ones. I would like to address to them our most profound support, and I wish them lots of strength for the period they are going to live now. For the forces of Order 2, it is an extremely complex operation, not just technically, but also on an emotional point of view. I would like to sincerely thank all of the partners, as well as all of the OCVS operators, 144 people, as well as those people operating in the field. I would like to provide some elements on the process of the intervention. The OCVS worked with the firefighters and the Valais resources, as well as the militia who were engaged quickly at the continental level. Unlike the day-to-day work, unfortunately, this time we needed to call upon major health event support. This tool contains officials from the OCVS, dedicated disaster situation, as well as others. The next steps in the operations does not represent a specific Valais or OCVS process, but meets international and national standards to respond to a situation given the larger number of victims, which is larger than the number of people available. In the first time, it involves seeing an overview of the situation and putting in place an organization for the site for the people there. And then quickly a triage event takes place to identify the injuries, and then they are directed towards the medical collection points established. Doing this, the medical triage took place, care in terms of therapy, as well as the organization of transport to the hospital structures. Treatment involved mainly stabilization of vital functions, as well as a large number of the people who we needed to intube, in other words, to put them into an artificial coma. The organization of the directions of sending them to the hospital was based on the capacity of those hospitals, carried out by our central organization, and we need to emphasize here there was significant solidarity from the recipient hospitals. They were able to significantly increase their capacity very quickly. This information was then shared to the officer Evassin, responsible for directing each hospital to the resources available and their destination hospital. In total, all resources were engaged, 42 ambulances, including 22 from the Vaud canton, that we would like to thank particularly for their support. 13 helicopters, including 6 cantonal helicopters, 5 from Reguin, 1 helicopter from France, 1 helicopter from Italy, and we would also like to express our thanks to them. A command vehicle, 2 heavy lorries, as well 1 lorry provided by the Vaud canton. This is around 150 health operators worked during that night, in particular ambulance paramedics, OCVS officers, PMEs, emergency psychologists, first responders, and more first responders. Furthermore, significant arrangements were put in place and activated. Coordination was put in place by the OCVS and is currently engaged. This ensures care of those people involved, patients, their loved ones, families, but also the people working in the field and centrally. An office was set up on place with between 10 and 20 psychologists to enable continuous support structured and adapted to needs. That was yesterday. So now, how are things going? Care of the burns is complex and can take several weeks or several months. Transfers of patients will therefore continue to occur. This situation can be explained for two reasons. First of all, given the number of injured and the lack of places available, patients, first of all, were distributed to the different hospitals in Switzerland, which had beds with intensive care and not necessarily specialists in burns. This approach aimed to stabilize vital functions in the first hours. And secondly, spontaneous hospitalization phenomenon occurred. We know this phenomenon in the management of the major health events. For example, it was agreed by our units to direct patients with resources available to take them to the Sion hospital. In parallel, around 40 people went themselves to Sion emergency rooms, some with significant burns which required major treatment. These transfers are organized in coordination with the national network of emergency doctors, Carter Met, the Coordinated Health Service, as well as a direct link with the Emergency Response Coordination Center. This coordination was already in place yesterday morning with members of the OCVS and the hospitals concerned in order to provide and to meet their needs. And the specialist medical teams are called the burn assessment teams from France and from Italy, also supporting Swiss hospitals and taking part in the coordination of transfers. We need to understand that here, that this qualification is done at a European level. These are standard procedures for providing care for severe burns and are following disaster situation. Currently, as we've already said, around 50 transfers are planned by Sunday, most to neighboring countries, namely Germany, France, Italy, and Belgium. Others will be offered based on capacity. Medical air transport has been offered by Germany, France, Luxembourg, Romania, and Italy. I have finished.
Voilà, donc je vais vous donner quelques informations.
So now I'm going to give you some information about the situation in the Vallée Hospital. First of all, by way of introduction, I would like to express here also the fact that all of the workers in the hospital are taking part in the pain and suffering we are witnessing at this time in the families, for the families in mourning, but also for the families and above all of those injured who are living a difficult moment at this time. The hospital was clearly very marked by that too. But at the same time, I would like to say to you that the Vallée Hospital worked properly during this period. I'm going to give information about our two hospital centres. We've got the one at Vallée-Romand and the other one in the Haut-Vallée. And these two both contributed at different times. First of all, the Vallée-Romand, the Sion site, states that the site of Sion is a site which is specialized in care of major injuries. So it is a place which is appropriate with the skills that are appropriate for this situation, this disaster situation, this emergency situation, and it worked as it should. It may have to state that this drama takes place, as we have seen, in a festive holiday context for emergency services. This is a moment with a lot of activity that we strengthened with the help of the department during this festive period, with a doubling of the population in Vallée during this period, and the emergency services are there too. So during this night, the night of the drama, the emergency centre was already very busy. There were the injured who were coming from the Grand Drama, but at the same time there were what I would like to describe as ordinary injuries. There's nothing ordinary, but those injuries that we have in such normal situations. So the Sion team responded immediately. Everything was prepared. All of the injured received care. I will later give you figures on that. Now, you also need to understand that clearly this changed a lot. This developed a lot, as Dr. Autain said. We moved to a stabilization phase, but we also need to understand that this is a period which is quite delicate, because this is the period where the families start to make contact with their injured loved ones. The hospital is a place of confidentiality. There needs to be calm too for the patients. And I'm saying that here because the pressure today from the media, which can be applied to the patients, can be difficult for them to live during this moment. This is why we are putting in place certain limits too. And I'm speaking to the media. As you know, many of you are trying to access the hospitals. We are putting in place limits to protect this intimacy, which is therapeutic and essential for our patients, clearly, and for their families with them. Having said that, in terms of the Vallée-Roman Hospital Centre, we had linked to the Grand Drama. We had 55 severe injuries taken to that hospital during the night of the drama. And of these 55, 13 were able to return home, which is good news, and 11 who are still at the hospital, and 28 who have been transferred to Swiss hospitals or foreign hospitals. Out of those 11 who are still in our hospitals today, we have 4 who are still in intensive care with in a critical condition, and we've got 3 who are receiving surgery in Sion, and 4 in Sierre, who is also providing care. In terms of Haut-Vallée also contributed quickly, receiving people from the advanced post of the OCVS, and received 7 patients in intensive care, and today 2 of them are still in intensive care at that hospital of Liège. That is the situation. As we can see, there was a lot of work carried out since yesterday to assess the situation, to transfer those cases which should be transferred. Another important element of these transfers is the fact that those people who were injured should quickly be as close as possible to their homes for those who are from abroad. As we said earlier, the type of lesions that you suffer in the majority of these people will need to be treated for a long time, and therefore is the need for these people to be able to be as close to where they live, because this relational, emotional, they need to be near their loved ones, where they live, and that is an essential part of their recovery too. So there is the situation for the Vallée Hospital. So a few words on the teams. The teams were clearly ready to respond to a significant arrival of people during these festivities, during these celebrations, but nobody was expecting this. The disaster plan at the hospital came into play very quickly, demonstrating lots of solidarity, as we have already heard. Very spontaneously, in the 2 hours following the start of this process, many colleagues came back spontaneously to work to help the teams and to cope with this influx of people. So there was a lot of professional solidarity, and at the same time concern too, because As we know, lots of people were wondering if there was somebody from their family there amongst in Caen at that particular time. It was a New Year's Eve, of course, so everybody was very worried to see these injured people arriving and also to wonder if maybe their loved ones were among them. So, heavy emotional load, but truly with a very professional spirit to face all of this. So the hospital will continue what it has to do today. The season is continuing, so there will be work to do, and we also take time with our teams. We have teams also on site, psychiatric teams, psychiatric intervention teams, who will be supporting the families, who will also be supporting the teams directly, and there will be an entire process that will continue with this support, both for the families of patients as well for the professionals who have the significant emotional load. So today, from our point of view, from a professional point of view, the toll we have faced up to this situation are continuing to do so, and our arrangements have worked, and we hope that that would have been the most useful, as useful as it could have been for the families of the victims and the victims. Ladies and gentlemen, before ending this press conference, I like to draw your attention to one essential point. There are different figures that have been given to you today. These are not definitive figures. The figures are perhaps different from other figures that you have heard. That is due quite simply to the changes in the number of injured. Lieutenant Colonel Lengen explained earlier, as did the CVS director, that there are people. Professor Bello also said that people came themselves to the hospital, to the emergency room, realizing that their injuries were more important, which increased the number of those injured. There were also people who may more or less have been identified, but not formally, not finally. And the figures that we have shared with you today concern those people who have been finally and formally identified. All of that will change, and I would like to thank you for bearing this development into account as it takes place in the hours and days to come. Before ending, I would really like to thank all the personnel, everybody at the table here as well, for the excellent work, the collaboration that we have to successfully carry out this investigation, to help the families and to save those people. This support is essential. I would like to emphasize too the solidarity which prevails, this solidarity within Valais, the solidarity across Switzerland, but also solidarity at international level, which we truly appreciate. Thank you very much.
Damit schließen wir den ersten Teil dieser Medienkonferenz. Sie haben nun die Möglichkeit, Ihre Fragen an die Redner zu stellen.
We're just going to temporarily leave that conference. I'm not sure if they're taking questions, and if they are, if they're going to be in French. Let's listen back in. So they're just passing the microphones around to journalists.
Associated Press, I would first of all like to thank all of your teams. We can only imagine the difficulty to face up to such a drama. There are still many questions. We understand that you can't answer all of them. We have all seen now, you said, these incandescent sparkles. We've also all been struck by the fact that it would appear that the ceiling was in a sort of foam, a sort of acoustic foam, and that also caused the fire to start. Could you speak about this aspect? We would also like to understand. We can imagine that this bar, this basement, has been inspected previously. Could you tell us about previous inspections? Was it somebody that complied with the regulations? And have you further information? We've been struck by the difficulty for people to get out of the site. Is there a single exit, this staircase, this doorway, of a size that was clearly not large enough? Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. We will answer in two phases. With respect to the acoustic foam you have mentioned, the investigation is indeed looking at the installation of this foam on all of the elements. The investigation will determine, or in as much as possible, it will determine whether this foam complied with regulations, whether it was at the source of the fire, and the investigation will look into that. Today, I am not able, given the time that has elapsed, to be able to tell you with certainty that it is a foam that did not comply or does indeed comply, that was installed with or without authorization. I would like to say, as I do in every press conference for the families, it is essential that we not make any assumptions, and I would like to thank you all for not making any assumptions. Leave us to do our work. I commit personally that the day that the investigation is ended, I will give you access to the conclusions of the investigation. I will now hand over to Stéphane Gonzère, State Councillor, to talk about the inspection, and thank you for your understanding. Thank you. So, the inspection of the buildings is governed by fire protection regulations. Their skills are shared across the canton, so the commune is responsible for periodic inspections of the buildings, depending on schedules, whether it's a major building, a small building. So, such as this bar in question, the investigations provide for inspections every year, which is recommended on those inspections. In the current present, it's the commune, the Cons, which is responsible for inspecting the buildings. When an investigation identifies defects, a report is made, and there is a deadline given to the owners for them to adapt the defects, to correct them. And where necessary, that is then shared with the canton for evaluation. And if the owner does not carry out that work, does not correct any defects, the canton will support the commune, which in the next steps, which could result even in the closure of the building. In the current case, there were no defects identified in the inspections. I can't say where, in principle, all of the communes carry out these investigations, and the police will also speak about the timing of the frequency of these. So, there were no reports of defects. So, in terms of the question about the materials being used, the doors, etc., this building had an emergency exit. There was not just one door. Even if during the fire it would appear that people left through the main exit, but this building was indeed equipped with an emergency exit. But you can imagine that during a blaze with smoke, which within just a few moments makes it impossible, which plunges people, makes it impossible for them to see, and then the blaze takes hold. You can imagine that very few people, or at least the majority of people, were not able to find the exits. Hello. Capucine Diaz is for BFM. I have several questions for you, Madam Attorney General. You said that the two managers have been interviewed. Could you tell us under what statute? And could you also tell us if you have an exact number of people who were present in the bar on that evening? You also spoke about these sparklers. Is this the main hypothesis for the moment? And then finally, a question maybe more for you, Mr. Bouvin. We've been able to talk with many families who are speaking about a complete absence of information. What do you have to say to that? Thank you. So I will answer on the managers who've been interviewed currently to give us information. In terms of the exact number of people present, it is not possible currently to answer you. I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know if it will be ever possible to have an exact answer at the end of the investigation, quite simply because it was a bar. People come and people go. So at the moment of the fire, it will probably not be possible to answer your question. In terms of the sparklers, this hypothesis is favored and is may be confirmed. So Professor Bouvin can answer if he wishes, but I would also like to specify in terms of information which is shared, that the information communication for those who took part in the three press conferences have seen that the four people at least who have been here at the three press conferences, so any communication must be made in a controlled manner and in a safe way which complies with the interest and respect also of the families. That is why we are not sharing hypotheses. When we say something, when we're talking about the number of injured, this is because it is facts that have been established. Nobody has given us that information. That's what I answered first. So to complement this information, to specify what has been said, we have at the hospital all of the families of people in the hospitals who have been received support, and we have shared with our team, with them permanently, a dedicated team, and as and when the information that we have on their loved ones in hospitals, and just at that moment there, we have shared that. But it is clear that we have not answered the concerns of families where they wondered if somebody was dead or not, if they were receiving care elsewhere. That was not within our remit. But in terms of the hospital, the information which has been shared in continuous manner with the families, we have been providing care to those people we have identified, because there are some people who have not been able to identify everybody. So this information was shared, and those people are still receiving support today. But it is clear, too, we can understand in the situation, this difficult situation, that for everybody it was difficult to get information and precise information. The key mission for the emergency services, local responders within the hospitals, was first of all to save those people, I think. So it took a certain amount of time to manage to get consolidated information, even at clinical level, as we always need to do with our patients. We have not neglected this particular aspect. It is a significant element. I have three questions. You've spoken about identification of the injured, but not necessarily the identification of those who have died. Out of the 40 who have died, are there people who have been identified? The second question, you spoke about sparklers that were used. Do they need a permit to use them? Were they entitled to use them? Are there safety recommendations for these sparklers in public spaces, closed public spaces? And a final question, there are witnesses who say that the emergency exit was blocked in the basement. Do you have any information on that? Thank you. Thank you. In terms of identification, clearly I was not clear enough, so I'm going to say what I said earlier. I hope it is explicit for them to understand them a second time. In terms of the people who have died, I said earlier that at this stage we have 40 victims and their identification is continuing without stopping. That is the absolute priority of the cantonal police. So we are still finding the formal, definitive, final identification of those people using the process that we explained, as the Colonel of the Judicial Police explained. I hope I have answered your question. Thank you very much, sir. Please, if I could come back to the sparklers. These are birthday candles that you can buy in a shop. We can all have access to them in terms of the fact that is it possible or not to use them in a closed or confined space. The investigation will be looking into that and answers will be given. Thank you very much.
Sandro Zulian vom Blick. Ich habe vorhin versucht, mit Nicolas Ferro Kontakt aufzunehmen. Er hat mich dann direkt per E-Mail an die Polizei verwiesen. Meine Fragen sind zum Thema Brandschutz. Ist es ja so, dass es sehr gut möglich ist, dass in der Bar etwas eingebaut wurde, was vielleicht nicht den Vorschriften entspricht. Auf der anderen Seite hat man natürlich aber auch Personen, die das kontrollieren möchten. Und dazu habe ich zwei Fragen. Warum ist der Gemeindepräsident von Crans-Montana heute nicht hier? Und die zweite Frage ist, wäre es nicht ein leichtes, die Brandschutzbeauftragten dazu zu befragen? Was habt ihr kontrolliert? Habt ihr allenfalls Fehler gemacht? Genau, Dankeschön.
Danke. Also Herr Nicolas Ferro war heute nicht eingeladen, da er gestern da gewesen war. Und er hat auch die Möglichkeit gehabt.
We don't have a translation for this particular part of the news conference, but let me just bring you the main points that we've been hearing over the last hour or so, and that is that the fire that began in that bar on New Year's night or the early hours of New Year's Day, authorities believe was started potentially by sparklers inside bottles. Now remember, we've seen pictures and video of that fire from the scene, which have been verified, which show a similar story. But important to reiterate that the authorities say they are still pursuing several hypotheses, but they assume the fire was caused by sparklers attached to champagne bottles. We've also had some confirmation of the number of those injured and their nationalities. For example, we know that 113 have been injured and most of them have been formally identified. Well, while we wait for translation to continue, let's bring in our guest, Professor Edwin Galea, who is Director of Fire Safety Engineering Group at the University of Greenwich. Professor, thanks so much for joining us and thank you for waiting. I know you've been listening to this press conference. Investigations are very much still underway, but what kind of thing would you be examining now if you were investigating this fire?
Well, there are a number of things, obviously, that come to mind. One is the nature of the materials on the ceiling. If the sparklers did actually set them off, how come they caught fire so rapidly and spread the fire so quickly? It's quite possible that it's the materials are acoustic dampening materials, and it depends on the chemical composition of those. For example, they could be polyurethane foam, which, if not correctly treated, is very flammable. So that'd be one area that I'd be looking at. Or were there decorations on the ceiling that caught fire, which then spread to the acoustic materials? So I think that needs to be looked at. the number of people that were in the underground, the basement bar area needs to be looked at. Did they exceed their license requirements? Did they have more people down there than they were supposed to have? And how many emergency exits did they have from that basement area? For example, typically, if you have more than 60 odd people, you would need at least 2 means of escape from that subground level. So how many did they have? And were the exits easily accessible? Were they visible? Were they locked? Were they blocked? So the whole number of things that will need to be looked at to understand why so many people have lost their lives in this tragic situation.
Professor, how common are these sorts of fires?
Well, unfortunately, they're all too common. I mean, to be perfectly honest, every festive period, I'm bracing myself to learn about another one of these fatal nightclub bar type fires. I think since the year 2000, we've had 38 fatal fires around the world in bars and nightclubs, and at least 15 of them have been started.
Liability, how to ensure that this couple does not just go back to France, given that France does not extradite its own citizens. Thank you. I will answer more generally. I'm not going to speak about the couple, the French managers, but generally, when somebody has been interviewed to provide information, if there is a risk that they could fly, we can take measures against that. And for now, there is no penal liability which has been identified. Hello, AFP. Out of the 40 who have died, do you know if they all died at the bar, or did some of them die after the fire?
Merci, monsieur.
Thank you, sir. I cannot answer your question. I do not have all of the information. What I can confirm to you today is that we today have 40 victims. Most of the majority of the victims were found in the bar. Thank you to the questions on the figures. I just want to be certain that we can work and inform everybody. So you said that among the 119 injured, there were 6 who have not been formally identified, but you also said that amongst the nationalities, there were 14 whose nationality is unknown. And I would like to understand, in other words, you have among these 14, does that mean that there are some, you know who they are, but you don't know which country they are from? That is more or less right. I will be more precise to answer your question. When I'm speaking about the identification of those people, I would like to say that we can give their surname and first name, but giving an identity is the work that's being carried out by the judicial police, the federal police, and by our investigators overseas, abroad, with those people with whom we have contact in those foreign countries. So if you break down the figures that I gave you, there is a gap or a difference, because we truly need to understand the definition that we are giving to these notions. These figures, as the Attorney General said, as I confirmed earlier, will change, and we are going to keep you informed regularly about the changes in these figures in order for you to then be able to do your work and to inform the population. Thank you very much, sir. And my last question was also a question about figures. On RTS this morning, somebody who is here said there are between 80 and 100 injured who were in a critical condition. That was the medical terms used, and I think that when we spoke about 119 patients, we did not give specific figures about that. Is it possible to say the severity of the situation for these 119 people? I can give a first part of this answer. It is not something that was said this morning. It's something which was mentioned yesterday during the press conference. 80 people have been transferred through OCVS, through the emergency services, and out of these 80 people who received in a great majority care on site, the great majority of them were in a critical situation, a critical condition. Maybe that the OCVS director could provide more information because he has an overview which will be more accurate than us. Unfortunately not. I can just repeat what we said yesterday. The term critical condition, you can say yes, somebody is severely injured or not, so it is impossible to truly give a figure about who was severely injured or not. But for the people that we treated, most of them were severely injured.
Danke, dass ich auf Deutsch fragen darf. Das wollte ich noch kurz sagen. Und gibt es jetzt kurzfristige Bestrebungen?
Well, as we lose translation on there temporarily, let's bring back our guest, Professor Edwin Galea, who is Director of Fire Safety Engineering Group at the University of Greenwich. We're just listening in there about the injured. There are so many of them. I do want to ask you this, if I may. What advice would you have for people before entering these sorts of spaces?
Well, it's really quite simple. I mean, any space that you enter, whether it's a nightclub or a bar or an office building or a shopping centre, you need to be aware of how to get out in an emergency. So certainly whenever I go into any of these public spaces, I look for the way out, not just the way I came in, but I look for the emergency exits. I live my life by the motto, chance favours the prepared mind. So, make a plan, be ready for the event of an emergency. And if you prepare a plan, if you've got some idea of how to get out, you're more likely to be able to survive that incident.
No, that's really interesting that you say that. I mean, I personally don't do that when I go to these sorts of spaces, but given this event, right, the press conference is over now, actually, Professor. While I've been speaking to you, they have completed their press conference. I'm just going to hold you there for a moment because I just want to give people the top lines that we heard from that press conference in the last few minutes. And just to give you a little bit of insight into what we've heard, we've got new details about how authorities believe the fire started at the ski resort in which 40 people were killed. They believe that sparklers on the top of champagne bottles held close to the ceiling caused the fire that then ripped through the bar during the early hours of New Year's Day. As I mentioned, we know that 40 people have died. The press conference has not given any more details about their identity, but we do know that they've managed to identify 113 of the 119 injured people, and their nationalities include from Switzerland, France, Italy, Serbia, Bosnia, Belgium, Luxembourg, Poland and Portugal. There are still a number of injured people who have not been identified, and their nationalities have also not been identified. So those are the key news lines that we've got from the press conference. We're just seeing pictures now of the fire taking hold inside that club. Now, in terms of investigation, we heard from the head of the Swiss Judicial Police, Pierre-Antoine Lengen, who said that the investigation is an absolute priority and that authorities want to give correct remains back to the families. We also heard that there is a long and unbearable wait for the families of those victims. You're seeing here still pictures from inside the club that have been verified that show what is believed to be the beginning of that fire, which took hold in the early hours of New Year's Day and killed 40 people. We'll have more on this story, of course, throughout the day here on BBC News.
Spark, it just totally engulfed this bar. A carpenter that I spoke to said that.
what went so tragically wrong in that bar in the early hours of New Year's Day. How so many people found themselves so quickly trapped in a fire and smoke through the also
unhappy when you are.
They are also waiting for answers as to quite what went so tragically wrong in the fire in the early hours of New Year's Day. How so many people found themselves so quickly trapped in a fire and smoke through the Okay. They are also waiting for answers as to quite what went so tragically wrong in the bar in the early hours of New Year's Day. So many people found themselves so quickly trapped in a smoke and fire-filled basement. Okay?
Okay, Jane, how's it going?
They are also waiting for answers as to quite what went so tragically wrong in the early hours of
down
New
here on
Year's
that. People are still showing up constantly with tears in their eyes.
Okay.
3, 2, and 1. They are also waiting for answers as to quite what went so tragically wrong in that bar in the early hours of New Year's Day. How